Hi, this is take several. Hopefully this time it records and I'm able to put this onto a computer. I've switched between several cameras and cords. The upside of this is I've done this several times now, so hopefully I'm a little bit more concise. This is my my video response for the two papers from the ASL3 class. I will start with my response to the TV portion, the closed caption TV. A positive thing that came out of the closed caption paper assignment, I was surprised at the number of media files and sources that are closed captioned. I thought it was a very limited thing. The number of shows and stations and movies that had closed captioning, but it seems to be a good number of them now, so that seems to be a very positive change. I understand that wasn't always the case, so it's nice to see that happening. I think it was probably a result of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the CC requirements on a lot of new programs, or just the fact that it's possibly more efficient to do these days with digital media. So a positive thing is better access for deaf people to video content. A negative thing that came out of it was just, well, other than just the fact that I found myself reading rather than watching in some of the medias, the news and whatnot, is that it makes me wonder how accurate the closed captioning was. I assume that for movies that I've never seen, so I'm not exactly sure, but for things like Black Swan, I assume the closed captioning was pretty accurate. Same goes for The Simpsons, but for the local news, I wonder how it's done, and I found myself wondering if it was completely accurate. There were a few things that popped up that didn't seem quite right. So yeah, the negative thing is just that, how accurate is the closed captioning on some of the live programming or what have you. So that's my negative thing. And also, that you miss the music, for movies you have music that sets moods. When it's just the closed captioning and no sound, there were pauses throughout the movie where there would probably be mood music being played, but since you're not listening to any music, it's just what you're seeing on the screen. And for stretches of this, type of event, there were stretches where there was nothing being said, so it was just, it was basically setting scenes, and typically the mood music would kind of get you in kind of a state of mind where you're not really too noticed, that the lack of text isn't too noticeable, but when there's no sound and they're trying to set a mood or set a scene, it becomes a little bit slow-paced, so that would be a downside. Oh, sorry. For the thing to ponder, I would ponder the technology being used for closed captioning. YouTube has recently released their closed captioning software, so that they apply closed captioning to, I think, every video uploaded to YouTube automatically through a software program that just goes through, I'm imagining, a speech recognition filter and applies what it thinks people are saying in the videos. It's not somebody manually, typing in what is being said. It's done automatically with software. And having watched those videos with sound, this wasn't part of the assignment, just something I've done before, and it shows you just how lacking, even still, voice recognition software can be, especially when they're trying to do it for video. So you could watch some of these, you can probably, I don't know if you've tried it, but go to YouTube and just open up a random video, and there's a little CC button. You click that, and YouTube will automatically apply closed captioning from its own software to the video you're watching. And yeah, the results are very lacking. Sometimes it's kind of close to what's being said. Sometimes it's not even close, and a lot of times you lose a lot of the nuance because it's trying to say what it thinks people are saying, but you can lose a lot of the little fluctuations of voice that indicate sarcasm or things like that. So yeah, the automatic closed captioning software does seem to be a bit lacking. So I'd ponder how that's going to advance, and if that's ever going to get to the point where closed captioning software can accurately translate closed captioning onto film without having to have someone manually go through and type it in, which I imagine they do for movies and actual syndicated sitcoms, things like that. So for my second paper, we have the Through Deaf Eyes video. Positive thing with that, I would say I found it very positive how deaf education has progressed. Deaf education today seems to be a lot more tailored to the individuals. It seems to be a lot more positive, and that it encourages sign language, which seems to be the preferred language for a good number of deaf people, rather than prohibiting it like it was 100 years ago or 130 years ago when Edison was running the schools or involved in that whole education deal where they discouraged sign language and they were trying to teach deaf people to speak, which arguably wasn't the best way of going about it. So I would say positive education seems to have advanced quite a bit, and it seems that deaf people have a lot more control over their education these days. It seems that with the deaf college, they are able to tailor their education to meet their needs rather than depending or relying or being forced to have their education meted out to them through people with hearing that may not be as familiar with the deaf culture or the deaf needs. So yeah, I would say over the last 50, 100, 150 years, it seems, according to the video, that deaf education has dramatically improved. A downside would be, I was kind of curious about the deaf riots. They mentioned that they selected of 3 candidates a hearing candidate, but I found myself wondering, was she just a random person well, not a random obviously, but was she someone without any ties to the deaf community and she was just chosen because they thought she'd be better because she could hear, or was she someone that had extensive ties to the deaf community, maybe had a deaf child or friend or loved one, and maybe she had spent quite a number of years with the deaf community, maybe she was very familiar with sign language. So if that's the case, which I imagine it might be, why else would they choose her? Was it kind of a slap in the face to her to be so rejected by the deaf community? It would seem that if someone had dedicated themselves, which again I don't know that she did, they don't mention if she did or didn't, but to be president of a deaf college, I would imagine that the 3 candidates would have all had to have been very extensively involved in deaf education. So if she had possibly put so much time and effort into the deaf community to be completely rejected that way, it might be kind of a slap in the face, but maybe that wasn't the case. I don't know. The movie didn't cover that aspect of it. But then it raises the question for the next president that was protested against, the partially deaf president. And that was an interesting question because I can understand their desire for them to be represented by a deaf president. That's totally reasonable. But then it brings in the gray line. Who's deaf, who's not deaf, and who's deaf enough. The president, and this is what we were told in class, so I'll assume he was, let's say, partially deaf. Who's to determine who's deaf enough and who's not deaf enough? If he's partially deaf, I'd imagine he's very involved in the deaf community. He has all the insights that would be necessary for someone to work with the deaf community, and himself suffering from deafness. It just seems to be like a rejection in a way. It's like, you're deaf, but you're not deaf enough. Well, what's deaf enough? And what do you do with people that are in that in-between area, the gray area, that are partially deaf? And obviously they have the disability to a point that it makes them deaf, but they can still kind of hear. So are you punishing them? It just seemed to be a very strange gray area. So the negative just seemed to be, I can understand the deaf community's desire to be self-represented and self-run, but it just seems that, especially with the partially deaf president, they were almost being exclusionary. They were making it an exclusive club rather than a community that was very close, as it should be, but also very open to people that want to become involved, or that may be, one foot in the door, one foot out, partially deaf. It seemed to be almost very exclusionary, and that's to me a bit disturbing in a way, because I don't like to see people excluded from or discriminated against. And if you're telling a partially deaf man that he's not deaf enough, it just seems very discriminatory. So I didn't like that aspect at all. For the thing to ponder, let's see. Basically, it was about the future of deaf education. It sounds like the deaf schools, the deaf boarding schools, are out, and deaf education is being more dispersed into just public schools. A lot of public schools now trying to accommodate the deaf students. It sounded like, according to the video, a good number of the deaf students were just in normal classrooms, sometimes with interpreters, sometimes with medical advancements. So it makes me wonder, is the deaf community going to be a community that's going to disperse somewhat, as the people with the deafness are no longer, I don't know if hindered is the word, but they're more able to function in classrooms that are not tailored specifically for deaf students. So losing that connection, is that going to disperse the community somewhat? So that's something to ponder, is just how is the deaf community going to deal with potentially a shrinking population as people get medical treatments, stronger hearing aids or cochlear implants to deal with deafness? Is that going to severely reduce the number of people that are learning ASL Sign Language? Is that going to impact the community as is? Because it is a relatively small community. I believe you mentioned 300,000 people. For a country this size, that is a pretty small community. It's a very tight-knit community, but a very small one. So I wonder if they can weather shrinking numbers if young people that are deaf are seeking medical treatments to the deafness rather than learning to live with the handicap. So yeah, going forward, I just wonder how the deaf community is going to react to potentially a shrinking number, and how deaf education is going to disperse the very tight-knit deaf community possibly into a very small community. And yeah, that would probably be my thing going forward, so positive, negative going forward. Hopefully I didn't ramble too long in this video. It is my several takes on it, so hopefully this one records and I'm able to put the memory card. Anyway, I'm rambling, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you.